Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Today I speak to you terrified, horrified, and deeply concerned about the future of the Republic. Why does it matter to me, a British man residing in Washington, D.C.? Well, because the future of the United States is the future of Western civilization. Where America goes, we all go. There's an old phrase, when America sneezes, the whole world catches a cold. But what if America is reduced to its knees by forces more concerned with power than they are with the preservation of the Republic? What happens to the whole world? Who provides the moral leadership? Who do we aspire to be? That's just some of the reasons why I'm concerned about what the Democratic Party and their affiliates are doing to the United States. This morning on the National Pulse website, we expanded on the breaking news from Axios. A top Democratic data analytics firm confirmed it believes President Trump will win on election night, but in the following days, mail-in ballots will trickle in to reverse the victory in favor of Joe Biden. The admission divulged by the company's CEO, Josh Mendelson, confirms predictions made by the Brexit architect Nigel Farage and myself here on the newly launched television show. I want you to go back and listen to both the clip that we're going to play to you now from Josh Mendelson in the Axios interview and then what Nigel Farage said. Let's roll it.
What does that mean?
The reason we talk about a red mirage is, in fact, because we believe that on election night, we are going to see Donald Trump in a stronger position than the reality actually is. We are sounding an alarm and saying that this is a very real possibility, that the data is going to show on election night an incredible victory for Donald Trump. That is likely to be what we see when every legitimate vote is tallied and we get to that final day, which will be some day after election day. It will, in fact, show that what happened on election night was exactly that, a mirage. It looked like Donald Trump was in the lead. And he fundamentally was not when every ballot gets counted.
You have a result on election night where it appears that Donald Trump has won, but a result after ballots are counted that show that Joe Biden has actually won.
That's right.
Unbelievable. Now let's remind ourselves of what the Brexit leader himself, Nigel Farage, told this program exclusively just a couple of weeks ago.
I tell you what, of those that go out to vote on November the 3rd, Trump will win the majority of votes in the Electoral College. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt about it. Why? Because the Trump base are still very highly motivated. And if you look at Biden, right, and there's a truth here that Obama won't admit, that Clinton won't admit, that none of them will admit. The truth is Biden isn't up to it. He's past it. He's what in English terms I would call a duffer. He's not up to scratch. He's not fit for high office. Everyone knows it, but no one dares say it. But the voters, when you ask people who are declared and say they'll vote Biden, when you ask them why, over half of them say, because I don't like the other bloke. That means enthusiasm levels for Biden are very, very low. And that means on polling day, people who support Trump will go and vote. People who support Biden just won't go out and do so in the same numbers. So on the day, he'll win the vote. My worry, and you just touched on it, my worry is this early mail-in voting. I've seen postal voting, the British equivalent of this, abused wholesale in the United Kingdom to the advantage of the left. And, the worst scenario of all is we get, on the morning of the 4th of November, Trump looks like the winner. And then over the course of the next 10 days, all these mail-in votes are counted and the result gets reversed. And Trump is quite right to raise a flag and to say this is not how elections should be conducted because they're open to abuse. So, yes, I think he'll win. But to me, the early mail-in voting is potentially quite a dark cloud on the horizon.
That right there is why Nigel Farage has had victory upon victory upon victory over the last couple of years. An incredible prediction there from Nigel Farage, speaking to this show just 2 weeks ago. Now Hawkfish, a Democrat-linked firm actually working for the DNC, is saying the same thing. And I think it's because we caught them out. Now they know that we know their game, and we've got plenty more to add to this reporting over the course of this show and beyond. And what it does for the eagle-eyed viewers out there, for the people who have followed this show from day one, I realize it wasn't that long ago, it takes us back to the Transition Integrity Project. Remember that? We've talked about it before. If you don't remember it, make sure you go back on the National Pulse website and educate yourself as to this organization. It's an organization that emerged at the end of last year that pretends to be a bipartisan group interested in making sure the election is free and fair, but it's run by George Soros and the Open Society Institute, and it's partnered with a group linked with the Chinese Communist Party, the Bagruan Institute. The project presents itself as this bipartisan bulwark against President Trump and against this refusal to concede the election should President Trump lose. However, the effort is filled to the brim with establishment anti-Trump figures like Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign chair, John Podesta, Never Trump Republican National Committee head, Michael Steele, acting chair of the Democratic National Committee, Donna Brazile. Remember, she was the one who leaked presidential debate questions to Clinton in 2016. Look, they've been lauded and highlighted over and over again by the New York Times, and the group notoriously held war games where Podesta, playing the role of Biden, refused to concede the election, prompting states to threaten secession during their war game if President Trump assumed office. For their war game, they cast John Podesta, quote here from the New York Times, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, in the role of Mr. Biden. They expected him, when the votes came in, to concede, just as Mrs. Clinton had in 2016. But Mr. Podesta, playing Biden, shocked the organizers by saying he felt his party wouldn't let him concede, alleging voter suppression. He persuaded the governors of Wisconsin and Michigan to send pro-Biden electors to the Electoral College. In that scenario, California, Oregon, and Washington then threatened to secede from the United States if Mr. Trump took office as planned. The House named Mr. Biden as president. The Senate and the White House stuck with Mr. Trump, end quote. The establishment knows what it has to lose if President Trump secures re-election, so they're getting their troops, consultants, politicians, media outlets, rhinos, the Chinese Communist Party, and George Soros all in line. Oh, and Hawkfish, that group I told you about right at the beginning, funded by Michael Bloomberg. You see what's going on here, and I have a full document in front of me here. This document actually comes from the Transition Integrity Project. We're going to put this up with all of my annotations so you can all read it on the National Pulse website over the course of the next few days. But it's called Preventing a Disrupted Presidential Election and Transition, and it was released in early August. We're going to get into all of that and more over the course of this show. My guests are Terry Schilling, the Executive Director of the American Principles Project, and Brendan Leslie, an independent reporter who's been out here in DC documenting the threats hurled at the White House by Black Lives Matter terrorists. We'll be back with more National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam. Stick around. See you in a second. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I want to say a big, great thank you to everybody who's supported this show so far. In fact, it's because of you and because of your support for myself and the site and the show and our reporters that we managed to bring you that information from Nigel Farage weeks before a Democrat firm themselves admitted what's taking place. I'm going to read from some of the documents that we found in recent days, particularly pertaining to the Transition Integrity Project, which hails itself as bipartisan, but it's not bipartisan. Every single person on that list that claims to be a Republican is no longer affiliated with the Republican Party or is an active and avid never-Trumper. This group is important, ladies and gentlemen, because this is the group that they intend to march before Congress immediately after the election to testify that President Trump, despite his winning, should no longer be president of the United States. My guest over the next couple of segments is Terry Schilling, the executive director of the American Principles Project. And full disclosure, the National Pulse is a project of APP. So technically, Terry, that makes you my boss. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Raheem.
Terry, this is disturbing beyond recognition. I have seen a lot of things in my lifetime, throughout elections, throughout referendums that have taken place here in the United States, that have taken place in the United Kingdom, across Europe. I've never seen anything so brazen as this. And the reason I say that is this isn't just an attack on democracy or the demos or the idea of one man, one vote. It's actually a direct attack on the US Constitution. I will quote for the audience out there one of the things this Transition Integrity Project says in its footnotes of this document that nobody has seen yet. It says, TIP recognizes and shares the view that the Electoral College is profoundly anti-democratic and that numerous long-standing practices also function to create structural biases in our voting system. What they're saying there is the rules are unfair and we're not going to abide by them. And the whole point of democracy, the entire predication of the vote, is that the loser consents. The loser acknowledges that they lost. You saw a couple of days ago, Hillary Clinton said Joe Biden shouldn't concede under any circumstances. We saw Nancy Pelosi saying that Joe Biden shouldn't debate against President Trump. So they're throwing every institution and every democratic norm out of the window. Meanwhile, they claim in this report that it's the Trump campaign who's doing that. Am I right to be so deeply disturbed by this?
Yes, and in fact, Raheem, you should be horrified. Every one of your people viewing your show right now should be on edge, and they should be figuring out how to address this and stop it from happening in their state. This is called the Voter Integrity Project, right? This is...
Well, no, it's called the Transition Integrity Project, which presupposes that there will be a transition.
Right. What I found with the left is that they always say the exact opposite of what they're doing. So when it's a transition integrity project, they are planning for a total coup and a takeover of our government, regardless of how the people decide. Now, what I'm mostly concerned about is the methods that they've set up in the previous crisis over the last three months with mail-in balloting. The whole point of our elections is that they have to be secure, and we have to know that our electoral system, our vote counting methods are secure, and that we have free and fair elections. That's what separates the United States from banana republics. And what's concerning to me is that by allowing for mail-in balloting, you are opening the floodgates to corruption and fraud and lots of mistakes. Security means limiting the points of access to people that would corrupt the system. And with mail-in balloting, you're opening it to every fraudster and every scheme artist out there. So I'm very concerned about it. But what's even more concerning to me is Democratic governors like Tom Wolf out of Pennsylvania, who are now openly saying, we will count mail-in ballots even if they arrive after Election Day and without a postmark. So that type of system, there's no integrity there. And that's why they call these projects the Transition Integrity Project. It's because there is no integrity, and we really shouldn't trust it. And we should all be very, very alarmed about this.
There's just an awful lot to go through in this document, and we haven't even had time to cover the whole thing yet in amongst ourselves and our research team on this. But the language is deeply disturbing because the language is designed to make you think that the only means by which a president should be elected is the popular vote. Terry, just explain to us why the popular vote was kept out of being the only thing in the Constitution of the United States.
Well, so at the time of our founding, the founders were geniuses, actually. They wanted to eliminate the chance of mob rule. And what mob rule is 50% plus one. So what they wanted to do was come up with a system that would force presidential candidates to build coalitions, right? They don't want New York and California to dominate our elections. They want the politicians who win New York and California to have to work with Iowa and Ohio and Illinois and Colorado and build a broad coalition. And that's what our Electoral College does. It's the biggest benefit is that it forces our political candidates, like for president, to have to campaign in states that the left calls flyover states. It forces them to build a broad coalition that brings us all together so that no one's rights are trampled.
I want to make sure we come back to that in the next segment here as well. I want to get your thoughts. Terry Schilling on Hawkfish, this DNC-linked firm. that is now admitting to what we've claimed all along. They intend to contest the election no matter what. We'll be right back with Terry Schilling, Raheem Kassam, and the National Pulse in just a second. Welcome back to the National Pulse, and a very special welcome to our supporters. If you want to support our work, it's thenationalpulse.com/support. And every Friday we pick a bunch of the very good people out there who have chosen to support the site, and we read your names, not your whole names of course. We're not trying to get you doxxed or fired or anything like that on air, just as our way of saying thank you for supporting the website and the show. Our guest here is Terry Schilling from the American Principles Project. Terry, we were talking in the last segment about this transition integrity project, all of these things that the Democrats are doing to effectively rig the election, and all the while they are projecting and saying that it's Trump who's trying to rig the election. But in the exercises that we saw in the Transition Integrity Project, and again, this document, you won't have seen this anywhere else, ladies and gentlemen, but we're going to put it up on the site, but I'm going to annotate it all for you first so that you can see exactly what is going on here. But they used organizing 1,000 influencers to denounce Trump's efforts to steal the election, organized all living presidents to stand with Biden and denounce the Trump administration's efforts to subvert the democratic process, recruited moderate Republican governors such as Baker and Hogan to form an election protection coalition, worked with local Democratic elected officials to call on the General of the National Guard along with representatives from the technology sector to monitor vote counting, organizing a bipartisan National Day for the Restoration of Democracy and a National Day of Unity. That sounds something like something out of 1984. And attempted a capital strike and a full work stoppage as part of an overall effort to push corporate leaders to insist that all ballots be counted. And presumably these are ballots that will turn up after Election Day. That's what Hawkfish is saying. That's what we're hearing from the governor that you just mentioned. It's what we're hearing in Georgia as well. This is rigging on a grand scale. And if this was the Trump campaign doing any of this stuff, it would be front page of the New York Times, and CNN would be leading with it in every single hour, every single bulletin. Meanwhile, this document, which is publicly available, albeit hidden, is publicly available, gets no attention. Why? Because it's the Democrats choosing to cheat. Am I right?
No, that's exactly right, Raheem. Listen, I know that a lot of your viewers are younger, so they might not remember this, but back in 2000, there was a little bit of election chaos in the Gore versus Bush election. And it all came down to the Chads in Florida. It came down to less than 5,000 votes, and they were recounting. And I think that this mail-in balloting system, this nefarious plot that you've uncovered, and thank goodness, because this is really the only way to stop them now is to expose them. But in Florida, it was absolute electoral chaos. But at that time, we at least had the Supreme Court step in and make a ruling to end the chaos and say, we're done recounting all these ballots. We counted them 5 times.
Don't see legitimacy in this current Supreme Court.
That's the thing, is that there's no way that the Democrats will accept a ruling from the Supreme Court. They'll say that that's rigged, and they'll continue to move on. So what you're doing right now is so important, exposing their plot and exposing their plan. And I'm just hoping that there are lots of other people out there that are listening to you and looking into this plan.
Well, I'm trying to sound an alarm here. I'm trying to sound an alarm because nobody else seems to realize what's going on here. Specifically, you mentioned the 2000 election. The Transition Integrity Project mentions that in the second paragraph of their report. TIP explains the basis for the assessment. Our findings are bolstered by the historical experience of Bush v. Gore, 2000, and other U.S. electoral dysfunctions. They go on to say the closest analogy may be the election of 1876, a time of extreme partisanship, rampant disenfranchisement, where multiple states preferred competing slates of electors, and the election was only resolved through a grand political bargain days before the inauguration, one that traded an end to Reconstruction for electoral peace and resulted in a century of Jim Crow. What they're saying here is if Joe Biden isn't declared president of the United States, regardless of what the people vote for on election day, that there is going to be a 100-year race war in the country.
Yeah.
That's a threat.
It's absolutely insane, and it is a threat. It's not a prediction of what will happen under Trump. It is a threat, and we're seeing these threats not just come from, weirdo organizers in these organizations that are funded by George Soros. We're seeing these come from Joe Biden himself. The front runner of the party is saying, "Do you really think all this violence and chaos is going to end if Donald Trump's reelected?" They're threatening us, and they're trying to intimidate us, and we can't let it stand.
Well, I know we need to move on from this, but it's just so much here, and you keep teeing me up, so I'm going to keep going with it. Look, on the second page of their report, they say exactly what you just said. Plan for a contested election. If there is a crisis, events will unfold quickly, and sleep-deprived leaders will be asked to make consequential decisions quickly. Approach this as a political battle, not just a legal battle. Sustained political mobilization will likely be crucial for ensuring transition integrity. Election officials will need political and public support. It just goes on and on and on.
What they've done here is they've come up with their own rules for revolution. Mm-hmm. And you know that it was inspired and written by the people that read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. This is a radical takeover attempt for our country, and we have to stop them. And the only way to do it is to come out with all of this now, so that when these events start to unfold, people can point back and say, well, this was part of the plan. It's going to be attacked, and it's going to be chided as a conspiracy theory, but I think the best thing you can do right now is to take this on and expose it to the entire world.
I know exactly what's going to happen. When the left sees this, when Media Matters and Meteorites see this, and our exposés of this, they're going to do exactly what they did with Andrew Breitbart. They're going to do exactly what they always do. They're going to call us conspiracy theorists. They're going to target us. They're going to target our businesses. They're going to target our, sponsors, our advertising revenue on the site, everything. Because this, for them, is everything. Mm-hmm. This is their playbook. You heard from the guy at Hawkfish. He didn't say, oh, this is one scenario that we're looking at. He said, this is the most likely thing that is going to happen. Terry, I know we need to get on to other topics here, and one of those is Never Trumpers, and specifically this Never Trumper called David French. I think he's still at the National Review or somewhere.
He's at the Bulwark.
He's at the Bulwark or whatever.
The Dispatch. Oh,
whatever it is. One of these Never Trump sites. But Never Trumpers are assisting with the Transition Integrity Project, and Never Trumpers are giving up on their morals, especially when it comes to pro-life issues, in order to remove President Trump. And President Trump, I believe, is probably the most pro-life president that we've seen in a generation since Reagan. And the people like David French saying, no, it's fine. We'll get rid of Trump. We'll have 500,000 abortions that could have been stopped over the course of those 4 years. I want to get to that in the next segment with you here. Terry Schilling, Executive Director of the American Principles Project. I want to make sure we give a good shout out as well to our next guest. Stay tuned. We're going to have Brendan Leslie, he's an independent reporter who left TV news because it was just far too liberal and left-wing for him. Brendan Leslie will be joining us in the next segment as well. I'm Raheem Kassam. This is the National Pulse. I want to make sure that you're going to thenationalpulse.com and also going to the APP website. We'll get Terry to give you all those details and his own Twitter feed and all that, so you can follow him. We'll be back with more National Pulse. Raheem Kassam, Terry Schilling, Brendan Leslie, after this break. Well, welcome back to the show, and we're so glad to have you with us. I'm glad that this audience is growing day by day. When you start a new show, as we did just 10 days ago, you often wonder, is anybody going to watch? Is anybody going to listen? But we're grateful to say that it's so far been a hit with you guys out there. Want your comments and suggestions? If you go to the National Pulse website, we have a tips box. I'm always willing to hear feedback, apart from how awesome our intro is. I know it's awesome. You don't have to tell me. It's fantastic. I didn't make it myself. We got a professional to do it, and she was great at doing that. We're very grateful for it. There's been so many people who've wanted to support this show and just lent all their wonderful talents and abilities to it, including yourself, Terry, when I came to you a while back and said, hey, let's restart the National Pulse, which is a website that you guys had at the American Principles Project, 5 years ago?
Yep.
and now we're doing nearly 5 million page views a month. It's absolutely amazing.
And when you took it over, it was getting around 12,000 page views a month.
12,000 a month.
Yeah, so now
5 million a month.
So we've had incredible growth. There's a ton of support out there, and this thing's really taken off.
They call me King Midas. Terry, I want to get to David French here, because David French is this never Trumper who has said that even though he's pro-life and that President Trump is a pro-life president, that he doesn't want that issue to mar his ability to vote for Joe Biden, to vote against President Trump. And why is it? Because Trump's a little cruder than he would like?
Well, look, there's a famous politician recently who had a great quote, and I'm going to take a page out of his book. If you're not voting for Donald Trump and you claim to be pro-life, you're not pro-life.
You ain't pro-life.
You ain't pro-life, man. Listen, there's nothing not pro-life about Donald Trump. He basically became pro-life like yesterday, and he's embarrassed so many pro-life politicians and leaders who have been lame and ineffective and everything. But there have been groups like the Susan B. Anthony list and Leonard Leo at the Federal Society who have worked with President Trump and been very constructive. And because those groups work with President Trump, he's been able to nominate over 200 pro-life judges to the federal benches. He's been able to defund Title X funding. We're talking like $50 million a year from Planned Parenthood. He's redirecting funding to women's health clinics, like ones that don't support abortion. You name the pro-life issue, and he's done much more than any other previous pro-life president combined. So to have people like David French, who are claiming to be the most pro-life people in the entire country, be confused about whether or not they can support President Trump, or even as overtly, in opposition to President Trump as David French is, it's just puzzling to me. And I think that it's because they like going to the DC cocktail circuit, they like hanging out with their elitist friends, and they don't want to be tarred by President Trump's Twitter, which really isn't that bad. I mean, let's just be honest.
It's also got kind of a little bit more tame in recent years, I think. I'm
a little disappointed about that, but it's fine. I trust his judgment. But listen, David French is not that pro-life. If you're not voting for President Trump against Joe Biden in an election where Joe Biden is saying he's going to repeal the Hyde Amendment, you're not pro-life, man. Let's just stop pretending.
Right. And there's this excellent op-ed by Frank Cannon, your boss.
My boss,
right,
yeah.
So my boss's boss, on the National Pulse website, walking people through this, and it's had just an incredible response on the site, lots of readership for it on the site, because people are starting to realize that if these never-Trumpers get back in control of whether it's the Republican Party, if they team up with the Democrats, as this document tells us that they're going to do, I mean, what does that portend for the pro-life issue?
You know, I just want to say something about Frank real quick, because I'm so glad that we finally have a platform like the National Pulse to put Frank's ideas up there. Because before the National Pulse, and there are a lot of other ones out there too that have put our work up there, but it's been people like David French at the National Review that are being propped up as the pro-life legal experts. Frank Cannon has done so much. He influences everything in the pro-life movement, and he's an incredible strategist. And he's able to easily point out all the flaws in these guys' logic, and he's built a pathway to fighting for the pro-life movement with the 20-week bill and defunding Planned Parenthood, all of that. And he's actually helping APP on the family side of things and how to fight back against the LGBT movement and the anti-education movement that wants to indoctrinate our kids in schools. All of this stuff. Frank is a mastermind, and I'm just so glad that the National Pulse is there to promote his ideas instead of David French's ideas.
Well, we're grateful to do it. Honestly, it was such an amazingly written piece. So tell us about the American Principles Project. What is it? How do people support it? Is it a membership organization? Is it what is your work? Where do you do it?
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of people hear of all these groups, all these sort of campaigny type groups and think tanky type groups, and nobody's ever sure, you know, what they do. And I always say to people, it's stupid. People just hand over checks to all these big DC think tanks. I won't name any because I know you've got friends at all of these places that you don't want to upset. But they hand over cash to these organizations. It's okay, Terry, I got your back on this one. They hand over cash to all these organizations, but we don't know what they do with that money. We don't know what their point is. So explain to us what the point of APP is.
What APP does, and the American Principles Project does, is we do campaigns and laws for family. So just like how the NRA organizes how the NRA organizes gun owners in politics, how the NRA organizes gun owners in politics to protect the Second Amendment, We organize families in politics to protect families and protect our rights. So right now, if you're a family, what group in Washington, D.C. is running campaign ads to unelect the bums and elect the good guys? There's no one. There's no NRA for families. And that's the gap that American Principles Project is filling. So when a boy, for example, in Connecticut, this is happening in real life. When a boy in Connecticut decides that he's actually a girl and starts to compete against your daughter in track and take away her scholarships and her championships, who do they go to change that law that allows him to do that? They come to American Principles Project.
Well, I just want to welcome back the viewers on America's Voice. We just heard from the President of the United States there, and this is the National Pulse show that you're joining. We've been keeping going here in the meantime, and everything that happened in the first part of this, as we went to the President Live, we'll make sure we get up for you here on the America's Voice channel later on today on the nationalpulse.com/TV. You'll be able to get it on YouTube, on Facebook Live, and beyond. I'm Raheem Kassam, the editor-in-chief of the National Pulse. Our guest in studio is Terry Schilling, and just in a moment we'll have Brendan Leslie, an independent reporter who came to Washington, D.C., joining us to tell us about his story, how he became this independent reporter, cast off the shackles of the major TV companies and networks, and why he did that, and also what he's been finding out on his travels. Brendan's done just an amazing job and really become an overnight success story, especially in the digital media world, because of the things that CNNs and the MSNBCs and all these guys don't tell you. So we're very grateful to have you back here on America's Voice with us following that address from the President of the United States in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Our guest here in studio is Terry Schilling. Terry, over the course of this show, we've been discussing this Transition Integrity Project. We've been discussing the other organizations and groups that are affiliated, be they Democrat, be they Never Trumper Republicans. And we're talking now about a lot of these Never Trumper Republicans, like David French, people who go out there and say, oh, I'm pro-life, but then they refuse to vote for the most pro-life president we've seen in a generation. And David French and all of these guys are just massive, massive hypocrites. And you were telling us there about your organization, about the American Principles Project. So I just want you to just reset a little bit for the live audience here. What is APP? What do you do? Where do you do it? And what are we going to see from you in this election?
So very simply put, we do elections and laws for families. Just like how the NRA organizes families, how the NRA organizes gun owners in politics in order to protect the Second Amendment, we organize families in politics in order to protect families. We want to make it easier to get married, have kids, and then raise and protect and educate those kids. That's our goal. And right now, the family is so under attack. It's insane. And if you look at it, they're putting boys in our daughters' sports, and they're telling us that we're bigots for not wanting that. They're putting porn on our kids' smartphones. You know, any 11-year-old right now with a smartphone has access to, like, really bad stuff. But you name it, our kids right now are trapped in these failing schools, and the schools aren't even opening now. The schools and the teachers.
And when they are online classes, they don't want you watching what they're talking to your kids about. Even though your kids are at home and you're supposed to be policing them on Zoom, whatever it is, but you're not supposed to watch.
Right. They believe that our children don't belong to us. Right. They believe that our children belong to them, and it's their job to shape their values and their morals.
Sounds like Marxism.
It is Marxism.
Terry, we've got to go to a break here, but I want you to stick around. We've got Brendan Leslie joining us in the next segment here on America's Voice. This is the National Pulse, breaking in live after the President of the United States spoke there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I want to give a great shout out to our excellent production team who's keeping me on my toes today. They do such an amazing job here at America's Voice. And of course, a great shout out to all of you viewers at home tuning in to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, back in just a second. Well, welcome back to the National Pulse. Following that speech from the President in Kenosha, Wisconsin, lots to discuss on that, and we've got coverage of it all day long here on America's Voice. I want to bring now Brendan Leslie into the conversation. Brendan is an independent reporter now, having left the TV world. Brendan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Hey, Brendan, you did some amazing work here in Washington, D.C. We played one of the clips on the show yesterday. I don't want to take up too much time playing it again because I want to hear from you about what you saw at Black Lives Matter Plaza here in Washington, D.C. And then a little bit about yourself. Why did you leave the establishment news business? And what can you tell us about being a newly minted independent reporter?
So do you want me to start with what I saw first, or you wanted me to talk about my background?
Let's get what you did at BLM Plaza, and then we'll spend the last couple of minutes on you and your story.
Yeah, so basically, I've been seeing all these protests happening across the country, and a lot of them really have turned violent. But unfortunately, I'm learning about this through social media and not necessarily our national media outlets. And that really, it's disheartening to see. So I said, okay, as an independent reporter, I'm here to do the job that the fake news media won't do. So I bought a plane ticket, head to Kenosha, recorded there, then head to DC the day after. And unfortunately, when the sun goes down, I saw nothing but horrendous acts, lots of just terrible, terrible language, a lot of anti-American values being portrayed. It was really unfortunate.
It's extraordinary. Now, obviously, we had that clip from you of that gentleman who said, I say gentleman, a thug who said he wanted to burn the White House down, who said he wanted to accost congressmen and senators, and who claimed that he had beaten police in New York and that he was going to beat police in Washington, D.C. as well. Do we have any information on who that speaker was there at BLM Plaza, and if there's been any follow-up from law enforcement on your excellent reporting?
Unfortunately, I couldn't get his name because I was getting run out of the protest by some people that were just agitated that I would, to be quite frank, I'm a white guy without my fist up in the air chanting Black Lives Matter chants and saying death to America. So I stood out like a sore thumb, and they approached me right after this speech. So I had to just get out of there. It wasn't even worth my safety. I couldn't believe my ears when he just started speaking. I whipped out my phone. I couldn't believe it.
It's incredible. I mean, what you captured there. You'd think that if you were doing a public speech in a public place, although I guess they've kind of privatized that area of Washington, D.C., which is ironic for Marxists, but they've taken over that whole area of Washington, D.C. You'd think if you're giving a public speech, you wouldn't mind the public hearing you, but they seem to take real umbrage when we show them warts and all.
I don't get it, because that speaker could be heard clearly as day 10 blocks away. They want the city to hear this speech. And I'm not doing anything when I was there. I was just honestly broadcasting live. I didn't say anything. I wasn't putting any of my opinions in. And there's certain individuals they took exception to that.
Now, your footage has gone all around the world. I know it's been on some big shows over the course of the last 24, 48 hours, and congratulations to you on that. I want to hear your story. I'm sure the audience wants to as well, because I think you can be a bit of an inspiration for people if people see the light like you have to leave these big corporate environments where you're kind of sort of forced into this social justice mindset and method of reporting and actually do some of the things out there for yourself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how you came to the realization that you wanted to be truly independent?
Yeah, so I graduated college in 2016, went right into TV news. I worked in 3 different TV stations, a PBS station, a local cable news channel, and then a CBS affiliate, most recently in Fort Myers, Florida. And I fell into this rabbit hole, just getting into arguments and disagreements with my bosses every single day. I would write a script, I would send it in to be edited before I would put it on air, and they would send it back to me. And a lot of times I'm looking at it, and by a lot of times, I mean almost every single day, and I'm saying, I can't put my name to this. This isn't what happened. Why are we exaggerating this? And it's all done in the name of ratings. It's not just my station, it's every single station out there, and it's really unfortunate. And a lot of it tends to lean towards the liberal side of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I think, most of it, right? It tends to err towards the liberal side of the spectrum. So where's your mind at right now when it comes to doing this reporting? Are you going to be, Patreon focused or start up like a GoFundMe for your stuff? I mean, we would love to have more of your reporting here on America's Voice and on the National Pulse website as well. But I know you want to maintain your independence as well. It's so very important, which is why, by the way, I've never accepted to go into one of these major corporate news environments. opponents, even some of them on the political right, have this social justice patina over a lot of their stuff. So where do you see yourself going in the next 12 months, and where do you see your election coverage taking you?
Well, it's been a whirlwind. I was really covering just local here in Southwest Florida, and then all of a sudden I go and do this trip in DC, and now I've become kind of like a national reporter, which is definitely the direction I'm going into. Like tomorrow, I'm going to start being more of a national presence. I'll be traveling more. I'll be speaking. There's going to be, I'm sure, several outlets that are going to be looking to hire me for kind of contracted work to report what's actually happening out there. I never went down the route of GoFundMe's and collecting donations. I don't feel right ethically doing that. I'd rather, scrape the pennies like I've been doing this past year rather than taking money from hardworking citizens. I'm out there fighting for them because it's the right thing to do, not to become rich. I figured if I just followed my heart and kept.
Brendan, I guarantee you won't get rich off it. I guarantee you that you won't get rich off being a reporter. None of us do. We all do it for the same reasons you're doing it, and that's because the truth matters the most. And also, I will say this, and we'll talk about it offline, and we really want you to get you back on the show another time as well. But we've done this in so many different ways. I used to work for different news organizations on the political right, the National Pulse, and everything. And I just think that there's something in it, because we have a support mechanism on our site. We don't do any paywalls. Everything is free for the public to see and read. But it's a voluntary thing. If people do want to give to the National Pulse, for instance, they can, because it keeps us independent. It keeps us away from taking like big corporate donations or having to worry about big sponsorships like these Axios websites and the Politico websites and all these guys do. Brendan, I want to make sure you're back on, but give everyone your social media accounts real quick.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook at Brendan Leslie, BRENDON, and for Twitter it's _Brendan Leslie, and you should be able to find me pretty easily.
And we'll make sure that we share all of your profiles over the course of the day as well when we put these clips up. We're really grateful for you, Brendan, joining us here on the National Pulse. Really grateful to Terry Schilling. Make sure you're following him on social media at Terry Schilling, and we'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m.